James the Red Engine is the third book of the Railway series, and was first published in 1948. It was written by the series creator Wilbert Awdry, and its illustrations were the first to be done by Clarence Reginald Dalby, who redrew the artwork for the first book and Awdry's sketches for this one. 36 years later, all 4 of these short stories were adapted into 3 short episodes of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. Apparently, the Reverend claimed this to be the least favourite of the books he wrote, because he'd had to rush the writing of the stories. Another factor may have been that this was the beginning of his unsatisfactory partnership with Dalby. Anyway, how faithful were these adaptations? Let's see if we can spot the differences. The book's first 2 stories were merged into one episode of the TV series. The title used was James and the Coaches, rather than the original titles James and the Top Hat or James and the Bootlace. In the book's foreword, the author states that due to the railway becoming nationalised, the Fat Director is now known as the Fat Controller. The opening narration in the book states that James lives at the other end of the line. In Thomas and Friends, James had been seen staying at Tidmouth Sheds along with Thomas, Gordon, Henry and Edward. The Fat Controller mentions the reason James is painted red and not blue was to make him feel special after his accident with the trucks on his first day. This line is absent in the episode, as in the TV series, James's colour was always red rather than black. Edward warns James not to bump the coaches because they don't like it. In the book, Edward adds that it is okay to bump trucks because that teaches them to behave, but coaches will get revenge if pushed about. This information does not hold up, as even in the previous book and all future ones, it is established that trucks will play tricks on engines who knock them about. Coaches, on the other hand, are portrayed as being quite passive. The station that appears throughout this book is possibly Tidmouth, whereas in the episode the station is Knapford, which has 5 platforms. In addition to James causing wet steam to fall upon Sir Topham Hatt, in the book his loud causes the controller, the station master and the guard to jump with fright. Edward and James are pulling the orange coaches, associated as being for branch lines, but in the episode they have the dark green and pale yellow express coaches. James pulls the train and pushes Edward so fast that they overrun the platform of the first station they are supposed to stop at. In the book it is made clear that this is because James wanted to get away from the Fat Controller quickly. In the episode it is not stated that the fault falls entirely on James.
When at last they stopped at the next station, 2 coaches were beyond the platform.
He just wanted to run away before the Fat Controller could call him back. He didn't even want to stop at the first station.
Also, both he and Edward look upset, whereas in the illustration, only Edward looks unhappy. Just after passing the field where James crashed in Thomas and the Breakdown Train, the Red Engine has to cope with Gordon's Hill for the first time. During this, Edward gives a nod to the events of the story Edward and Gordon, where he had to push Gordon and his train of trucks up the hill. In the episode, the engines were shown rolling down Gordon's Hill, so it is possible their effort to get up the hill was filmed but cut out for time. At the next station, Edward makes James laugh, causing him to get hiccups, which frightens a lady and causes her to drop her parcels. This does not happen in the episode. James is now worried about what Sir Topham Hatt will say to him in regards to getting his top hat wet. In the book he ponders this before going to sleep that night. James is told off by the Fat Controller for being careless. In the illustration, he appears to be telling James this while he is bringing his coaches to the station. It is said that after collecting his coaches, James had to take them to another platform. It is not said where, and the one shown in the illustration looks exactly the same. James is cross because nobody is paying attention to him at the station. This is highlighted by the fact the station has plenty of passengers on it, but they are all standing as far away from the engine as possible. In the episode, besides James, the crew in his cab, and his coaches, there is literally no one else on the platform. James's train consists of 5 coaches, but in the illustrations he is pulling 8. The narration in the book claims James is going so fast that his coaches sway from side to side. In the episode, James clearly isn't going fast at all. Also, he still hasn't quite left the yard, whereas the illustration shows him to already be out in the countryside. The burst brake pipe that James's rough treatment of the coaches causes is located between the engine's tender and the first coach. But in the book, the hole in the brake pipe is found between the first and second coach. There are well over 50 passengers that gather outside of the train when the guard asks everyone if their shoes contain a leather bootlace. In the episode, including James's crew, there are only 8 people present. Not surprising, considering there was nobody waiting to board him at the platform. The smartly dressed man is given a name in the book, Jeremiah Jobling. The passengers' criticisms change from the crew to Jeremiah Jobling after the guard goes back into the rear coach and the driver and fireman make James let off steam. In the episode, this does not happen, as the fireman, driver and guard are seen still to be standing around the man and the few cross passengers.
If you can't behave, I shall take away your red coat and have you painted blue. So there.
James didn't like that at all.
James's shed appears to be located by Sodor's port, but in the episode he is at Tidmouth Sheds and the sea is not seen. Sir Topham Hatt is very cross with James for causing a few mishaps, but forgives him enough to let him pull a train of trucks. The tank engine, who shunts James's trucks for him and makes a bootlace-related remark, is not named nor seen. In the episode, the tank engine was played by Thomas. Also, the illustration shows the truck at the head of James's train is a van, but in the episode they are all the same shape, size and colour, besides the brake van. Due to a limitation of sets used in Thomas and Friends' first season, James collects his trucks from a station rather than a yard. In the TV series, Gordon's Hill curves around, and there are bushes and trees on either side. In the illustration, the hill is straight, and the only thing besides open countryside running alongside it are telegraph poles. A coupling snaps, causing the train to split in two. At the bottom of the hill, the guard stops Edward. The illustration incorrectly shows Edward facing away from the hill, indicating that he was pushing his train of coaches backwards. James is resting at a water column outside of Maron Station, but in the illustration he is parked in the middle of an empty siding. Edward is pulling trucks in the episode, yet Sir Topham Hatt still claims he was aboard the train at the time James's trucks broke away from him. Also, Edward is not smiling in the illustration.
Oh, no, no, oh. We want a proper engine, not a red monster. No.
James took no notice.
The illustration depicts the time of day Gordon and Henry are teasing James as during daylight. This scene in the episode takes place at nightfall. Also, this scene, which takes place at Tidmouth Sheds, was changed from being James's shed. As with the first story, the express coaches are orange instead of green and yellow. Despite the book stating that James watched Gordon disappear from sight before moving off, he seems to be following the big engine out of the station in the illustration. When Gordon returns after his route was accidentally switched to the wrong line by a signalman, James is positioned at the bottom of the station and is facing Gordon as he arrives. In the episode, James is at the entrance to Knapford, in front of some coaches he has just shunted, and Gordon enters the station from its other end, so the engines are side by side, besides the platform in between them. The Fat Controller puts James in charge of pulling the express, which he does very successfully. The narration in the book refers to the express's destination as the terminus, but in the episode it is just called the station. As he did it so well, Sir Topham Hatt promises to let James pull the express occasionally from now on. In the last page of the book, Gordon is glaring at James, which is at odds with his dialogue, where he admits he doesn't mind having to shunt trucks while James pulls his express, two things which the big engine will never again agree to do willingly.
Hello, Gordon. Is it tomorrow already then?
Gordon didn't answer.
Cheerio!